Imagine staying sharp for decades without a single supplement or screen. How did our parents manage it? In the era before brain pills and smartphone games, adults remembered every number, balanced budgets in their heads, and held conversations that exercised real attention. Science now confirms these daily habits slowed cognitive decline more than any modern shortcut. If true mental sharpness isn't bought but lived, what everyday routines did we lose? And what could they bring back to us now? A single phone call in the 1960s demanded more memory than most people use in a week today. Before speed dial or digital contacts, every number was stored in the mind or scribbled into a slim paper address book. Parents kept not just their own numbers, but those of neighbors, doctors, and the local grocer, often recalling them instantly, even after months without use. Rotary phones made mistakes costly. Each missed dial meant starting over, so accuracy mattered. Errands required a mental map of the city. With no GPS or smartphone reminders, a parent might plot a route from home to the post office, then to the dry cleaner, the bank, and the grocery store, sequencing stops for efficiency, remembering which streets had less traffic or where parking was easiest. Grocery lists lived in the mind or on a scrap of paper, but prices and totals were tracked mentally, with running tallies updated as each item landed in the cart. Planning a family outing or a volunteer event meant juggling dates and times, recalling birthdays, anniversaries, and appointments without digital alerts. The wall calendar offered a snapshot, but the real schedule lived upstairs, updated with each new commitment. Neighborhood organizers, often mothers or community leaders, managed phone trees for emergencies or school events. Each person was responsible for remembering who to call next, passing the message along without missing a link. Forgetting a single number could break the chain, so the sequence was practiced and reviewed, sometimes aloud at the kitchen table. These routines demanded constant mental rehearsal and recall. Research now shows that such active memory work strengthens neural pathways, building a kind of cognitive reserve that protects against decline. For our parents, this was simply daily life, an unintentional workout for the brain, repeated in countless small acts each day. A thick Sunday newspaper would land with a thud on the porch, and by mid-morning, columns of print filled the kitchen table. Reading wasn't a quick scroll. It was an hour or more of deep focus, moving from the front page to editorials, then to comics and classifieds. Parents absorbed details about local events, politics, and world news, often reading entire articles aloud or summarizing them for others. Children listened in or asked questions, learning to follow complex stories and remember names, places, and unfolding events. Evenings brought another kind of attention. Dinner was rarely just about eating. The table became a stage for stories, accounts of the day, memories from childhood, or family lore passed down in detail. A parent might recount a neighbor's good news or retell a story from the morning paper, weaving in facts, jokes, and opinions. Everyone was expected to listen, remember, and respond. Forgetting a detail meant gentle teasing or a prompt to pay closer attention next time. Long-form reading and rich conversation shaped mental stamina. Without background screens or digital interruptions, people learned to linger in thought. A novel could take weeks to finish, each chapter discussed and savored. Letters from relatives were read aloud, sometimes more than once, their contents remembered and referenced days later. Science now shows these habits matter. Sustained reading and active listening strengthen the brain's ability to focus, recall, and connect ideas. The daily paper and dinner table were more than routines. They were training grounds for deep attention. As the dishes were cleared and stories wound down, minds had practiced holding details, forming questions, and building memory, all without a single supplement or screen. A sheet of lined paper and a pen once stood at the center of daily planning. Lists weren't only for groceries. They mapped out birthdays, home repairs, and weekend projects. each item carefully considered before ink touched the page. For many, writing by hand was more than habit. It was a ritual that demanded attention and intention. A mother might draft a week's menu in the margin of a recipe book, adjusting as she remembered what was left in the pantry. Notes for errands, reminders to call a neighbor, or a child's schedule were all captured in looping cursive, posted on the fridge, or tucked into a purse. The act of writing did more than record information. Studies now show that forming each letter by hand engages the brain's planning and memory centers far more deeply than typing. Every list, every letter, every address, remembered and written out by hand, became a small exercise in coordination and recall. Across the country, shop notebooks filled with sketches and measurements lined garage shelves. A carpenter, recalling his early days, described how each project began with a pencil and a blank page. You had to picture the whole thing in your mind, measure twice, cut once. If you got it wrong, you started over. That kept your head sharp. Project sketches for a new bookshelf or a backyard fence were often drawn from memory, based on years of accumulated experience and mental calculation. Even a simple to-do list required prioritizing, sequencing, and sometimes reworking as the day changed. Letter writing, too, was a frequent exercise. Americans sent an average of 15 personal letters per year in the 1970s, each one demanding not just words but addresses recalled and stories summarized. These daily acts of handwriting and planning, repeated over years, built a kind of mental fitness that no supplement could match. The brain and the hand worked together, forging connections that supported memory, attention, and creative problem-solving, one list, one sketch, one thoughtful letter at a time. Knitting needles tapped out patterns in living rooms across the country, each row a quiet exercise in memory and precision. A scarf or a sweater wasn't just made by following instructions. It demanded constant mental calculation. Every knitter counted stitches, tracked rows, and adjusted for dropped loops, sometimes holding the entire pattern in their head. Mistakes meant unraveling hours of work, so attention to detail was second nature. The rhythm of hands moving yarn, the feel of wool gliding through fingers, and the click of needles created a kind of moving meditation, but one that kept the mind alert. Gardening, too, was a lesson in patience and planning. Parents mapped out beds in their minds, recalling which patch caught the most sun and which seeds went in after the last frost. Each season brought a new set of tasks: turning the soil, planting in rows, thinning seedlings, and remembering when to water or harvest. Success depended on observation and adaptation. A late cold snap or a dry spell called for quick thinking and flexible routines. Over time, gardeners built up a mental almanac: which varieties thrived, which pests to watch for, when to rotate crops. These were not written down, but passed from memory to practice, year after year. Embroidery and sewing offered their own challenges. Following a pattern meant reading symbols, counting spaces, and translating instructions into needlework, often without looking up. Mistakes were hard to hide, so focus was essential. Many kept running tallies in their heads. How many stitches across? How many repeats left? Which color came next? The satisfaction of finishing a sampler or mending a shirt wasn't only in the result, but in the process. A steady test of short-term memory, estimation, and fine motor control. These crafts weren't hobbies for idle hands. They were rituals that trained the brain as much as the fingers, weaving together memory, logic, and creativity in every project. In homes across America, the quiet repetition of these tasks built a kind of mental strength, one row, one seed, one stitch at a time. Every Saturday morning, a small group would gather at the corner diner, newspapers folded under their arms, pencils at the ready. The weekly crossword puzzle wasn't just a personal challenge. It was a communal ritual. One member, Mrs. Evans in her 70s, rarely missed a clue. She'd scan the grid, reading clues aloud, inviting debate over tricky wordplay. Each answer sparked a flurry of conversation: synonyms, history, spelling rules, drawing on decades of vocabulary built from books, radio, and conversation. The group kept score, but the real prize was the laughter and the collective memory that grew sharper with every puzzle completed. Word games didn't stop at the diner. In living rooms across the country, families gathered after dinner for story hour. Parents and grandparents would take turns reading aloud from novels or telling stories from memory. Children listened, sometimes reciting lines or correcting details, their minds tuned to rhythm and meaning. This practice did more than entertain. It trained auditory memory and attention. Neuroscientists now know that listening and speaking in turn, especially with stories, strengthens the brain's language centers and improves recall long after childhood fades. Evenings often ended with a round of word games, Scrabble tiles clicking on the board, or a spelling bee called out across the kitchen table. Every player, young or old, stretched for words, dredging up definitions and origins learned in school or from the newspaper. The competition was friendly but fierce, and mistakes were met with gentle ribbing and quick lessons. Over time, these games built not just vocabulary, but a nimble mind, ready to make connections and remember new information. For many, these rituals were as regular as brushing teeth. The crossword club, the nightly story, the family word game, each offered a workout for memory, attention, and language. Decades later, members of that Saturday group credit these habits for keeping their minds quick and their friendships strong. On Thursday evenings, the kitchen table transformed into a different kind of workshop. A battered ledger opened flat, fountain pen uncapped, and numbers began to flow. For decades, Mr. Walsh, a retired accountant, balanced the family books by hand. Each entry, groceries, utility bills, a birthday check, was added and subtracted mentally before ink touched paper. Errors meant retracing steps, scanning columns, and spotting the missing cent. He could recall last month's total from memory, sometimes even last year's. This weekly ritual was more than habit. It was a mental tune-up, demanding focus, calculation, and self-correction. Today, neuroscientists point to these routines as powerful training for working memory and executive function. Journaling, too, found its place in many homes. A mother might set aside a quiet half hour after supper, recording the day's small victories or frustrations in a cloth-bound diary. Some wrote about the weather or family news. Others reflected on worries or hopes for the future. These moments of self-examination did more than preserve memories. They required careful recall and honest self-assessment. Research now links such reflective writing to improved emotional regulation and stronger autobiographical memory, both key to mental resilience as we age. Sundays often brought the community together for trivia night at the church hall or local library. Teams huddled over notepads, debating state capitals, movie dates, or the year a favorite ball player hit his first home run. No phones, no lifelines, just what each person could summon from memory. The pressure to recall facts quickly, under friendly competition, kept minds nimble. These gatherings weren't just entertainment. They demanded rapid retrieval, teamwork, and a bit of strategy, an unintentional workout for recall and reasoning. Through these numeric and reflective rituals, parents and neighbors quietly strengthened their minds. The discipline of balancing a ledger, the honesty of a journal, the thrill of a trivia challenge, each became a building block for lifelong mental sharpness, woven seamlessly into the fabric of ordinary life. Decades of research now confirm what daily life once proved. The Lancet Commission estimates that up to 40% of dementia cases could be delayed or prevented through changes in lifestyle, not genetics or medicine alone. Activities that kept our parents' minds sharp, like reading, socializing, and manual hobbies, are now recognized as powerful protectors of brain health. In the Rush Memory and Aging Project, Older adults who regularly engaged in mentally demanding routines showed slower rates of cognitive decline, even when their brains carried the same signs of aging as others. Frequent cognitive activity, reading, writing, playing games, helped people stay independent longer and lowered their risk of Alzheimer's, regardless of education or background. Scientists describe this as building a cognitive reserve, the brain's ability to adapt and compensate, formed by years of mental challenge and engagement. These findings echo across studies worldwide. The evidence is clear. Natural routines of memory, planning, and social connection, repeated over a lifetime, can change the trajectory of aging. What once seemed ordinary now stands as a blueprint for resilience, grounded in the numbers as much as in memory. A sharper mind starts with simple, proven habits. Begin by reading 10 pages of a book each day, fiction, history, or anything that sparks curiosity. This daily stretch, just 15 to 30 minutes, builds focus and memory over time. Next, pick up a pen, write a letter, jot down a journal entry, or handwrite your grocery list at least 3 times a week. The act of shaping each word by hand engages more of the brain than typing ever could. Set aside 1 hour every day without screens. No phones, no television. Just quiet, uninterrupted time. Use it for a walk, a puzzle, or a real conversation. Once a week, join a group activity, a choir, a book club, or a volunteer shift. These gatherings do more than fill the calendar. They keep memory and social skills strong. Finally, challenge your recall. Memorize a new recipe, a poem, or a friend's phone number. 2 or 3 times a week, give your mind a workout with a crossword, some mental math, or a trivia game. These routines, grounded in decades of research, offer a practical path to lifelong sharpness. No supplements required. In the 1960s and 70s, adults routinely remembered up to a dozen phone numbers and navigated daily life without digital aids. Research from the Rush Memory and Aging Project shows that regular mental activity, like reading, conversation, and problem solving, delays cognitive decline more than supplements alone. Across diaries, letters, and oral histories, we found that memory, planning, and social rituals were woven into everyday routines. Yet, it remains unclear which specific habits mattered most, as few detailed records exist on individual differences. Today, major studies estimate that up to 40% of dementia risk is linked to lifestyle, not genetics. The evidence is clear. Our parents' sharpness was built on daily challenges, not pills or screens. As science continues to explore the details, one fact stands: real-life mental engagement shaped resilient minds, leaving a proven blueprint for brain health in any era. Thank you for watching and spending a little time with us today. If you enjoyed this journey back to the simple, timeless ways to stay strong and feel young, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. We've got more inspiring stories and documentaries coming soon, right here on Seniors Retro Vitality, where yesterday's wisdom builds a healthier tomorrow.